Good morning, precious men of valor. Good morning, precious women of valor. Once again, welcome to the Leadership Excellence for Women by Women talk show. In a previous segment that we had out a week ago, we discussed about a very deep and painful subject, rising from childhood victim of sexual abuse to children's advocates, a deep daughter-mother conversation. And we had our guest, Luisa Rodriguez, and her mom, Pastor Lucy de Leon. In that segment that we had, we discussed about how or what happened with Luisa when she was about 2 or 3 years old, when sexually abused. How did that affected her relationship with her mom? What the clues and things that parents need to look for in their children when they start seeing change. Today, we're going to go now into the how to get healed, how to deal with that issue, and how, as parents, can we equip our children to self-advocate. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the questions and answer, do not forget the 20 viewers that will tag and share both Luisa's website that is up here on this video and Leadership Excellence for Women by Women video also on this page. And those that will friend the two of us, our Facebook page, they will receive a beautiful ebook that was written by Luisa Rodriguez. And the book is called Preparing Our Daughters for Poverty, a Mother-Daughter Bible Study. Luisa and Pastor Lucy, thank you again for being with us for this second segment. Luisa, I would like to ask you, I know in the previous segment, Pastor Lucy was talking about what happened to her, herself, to her mom, and to you. We supposed to ask that this was a generational curse that was going on in the family. Because from what Pastor Lucy shared with us in previous segment, her mother went through sexual abuse. Pastor Lucy herself went through sexual abuse, and her daughter Luisa went through sexual abuse. Because of all of that, we're going to talk now about the process, what the two of you learned, and the advice that you could give to parents. Let's start with Luisa. How do you think, Luisa, can we parents equip our children to self-advocate?
Yeah, so when I kind of was thinking through this, I mean, because I write a lot about protecting kids from sexual predators. And so as I thought back to my childhood and just how I was shy and how I didn't speak up. And so I realized that I think as parents, we assume that if something happens that our kids will talk, and it's a really bad assumption. We actually have to train our children to talk. Now, my Emma, my 14-year-old, since she's shyer now, but you know, it's the middle school years, it's a shy period. But she was never shy. Even as a baby, she was like, she wanted to be with people. She'd like throw her hands out at random strangers. She just always was very talkative. But my Leah, since she was a baby, was always like, mommy, mommy, very shy, very, very quiet. And so I intentionally started to teach her how to self-advocate for herself, how to talk, and not to be afraid to talk to adults. And the way that I would do that is very simple. Like we'd go to a restaurant since she was really small, and I'd say, you need to order your food. You know, and I said, look at the waiter, waitress in the eye, let them know what you know. And then she'd be like, no, I don't want to. I was like, your voice, and I tell her things like, your voice is important. What you have to say matters. And they're really nice. They're going to take your order. And so just like if she needed something at the store, of course I'd be supervising, but she needed something, please ask them that you need help. just to get her comfortable with the idea of talking to adults, that it's okay for her as a child to talk to an adult, as long as, it's done respectfully. And, now this girl who was super, super, super shy she's such an extrovert, and she'll let you know what she needs if she's at her friend's house. And, when she talks to their parent, like, she's very open.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible to train a child to be able to have that voice. And we sometimes, because we want our kids to be obedient, right? Mm-hmm. We want them to be obedient. We don't want them to interrupt. And we send them signals, right? I forget what was that old phrase, children should be seen, not heard, right? So we send them those signals that what they have to say doesn't matter. They don't know that when it's an emergency abuse situation, that it does matter and they have to speak up. And they're smart enough to understand the difference. My girls know that at 9:30 p.m. I check out. That's mommy's time. They know not to interrupt me, but they also know that if they're struggling with something, if something's going on, that they can interrupt me. So they know that if they come down and ask me to, like, something that has nothing, that's not important, that I'll probably get upset. But they also know that if it's something serious and they come down, that I'm not going to get upset. But you have to show them the difference, and they'll learn when it's okay to speak up and when it's not. But if you're not intentional and you don't tell them that, they just don't know that. The signals they get from adults is that they shouldn't speak or they shouldn't interrupt. And so they don't say anything. So I think the first thing is actually teach your children that their voice actually matters as far as self-advocacy goes. The second part is that you need to teach kids godly disobedience. And as parents, we're really good about teaching obedience, but there is a thing as godly disobedience. And again, you have to be very intentional to show your children the difference. And you do that really by establishing that God is the ultimate authority, and that when an adult disobeys God, that you can disobey that adult if they're asking you to do something that God wouldn't like. And it's a simple concept, but it's a powerful concept for them to understand that, okay, there are situations and circumstances where it's okay for me to say no, and to use their voice to say this isn't right, and to understand in their mind who the higher authority is, and that God is the highest authority. So that would be, I have other recommendations as far as protecting kids from sexual predators, but as far as advocating for themselves, those are the two things that I would recommend.
Thank you so much, Luisa. I will get back to some of the points that you said, but let's hear from Pastor Lucy. From your experience, Pastor Lucy, and given the fact that you also mentor so many women from, I would say, the needy condition, what do you think can you teach, or are you teaching them in order to equip those children to self-advocate?
Yes, one of the biggest things that, unfortunately, Mercy, we have to deal with in a lot of the mentorship and healing process that we have to take a lot of teenagers especially, is that parents, even at church, trust too much. You understand? Oh, it is my pastor. It's okay for my daughter to be alone with the pastor. No, it's not okay. Because there's always need to be a female presence when a young child is with a man that is older. You understand? I unfortunately, I have had to be a witness to, confessions of girls who have to forgive their pastors or the youth pastors who abuse them or improperly touch them. And, nobody told them that was not okay. So one of the things that I would tell our Christian families is you can never be too trusty. You have to train your kids, like Luisa said, when it's an ungodly move in a man that calls, or a woman who calls themselves a man of God, they have to be able to say no and run, and fight like you fought. We need to teach our kids that it's not okay, because what these predators are doing is telling those kids, oh, God is with me, it's okay, you can do this. No, it's not okay. It could mark a girl. I have a specific one girl that Luisa knows very well, and this girl was marked by her senior pastor, and her life became a domino of destruction until she finally was able to accept herself, that she wasn't guilty. It was not herself, and she was able to forgive and release, and she was finally able to totally change her life. And we have seen many, but one of the advices I'm telling you is that when there is males, don't ever trust too much. Make sure we're easy. I was easy at my age to leave my kids to whoever was taking care of them, and even family members. I should have known better. My own family members abused me, but it doesn't process. When you're not in Christ, it doesn't process. But now that I know what it could happen, remember that what happened to your child is going to affect their lives for a long time. So it's better for them to be totally validated by a father that will protect them. Listen, I had a dad that validated me and protected me. And I remember he would never, ever let me go to a pajama party or go and sleep anywhere. But you know what? It was one moment, as I said, he took eyes away from me from an hour and a half that the show went. And that time they got used right in front of them, almost in front of them, to do this. So it's never too much protection. We need to allow the kids to be kids, but we have to keep our watchful eyes. In these latter times, when Jesus, we know, is coming soon, we see what's going on in the world. The enemy and the sexual predators are more demonized than ever. And we have to be watchful of that, because what they want is to pass destruction to the next generation, so the church will totally paralyze and stop. Everything is about the kingdom. Everything is about Jesus and about us being able to fulfill our God-given plan when we were born. And the enemy's work is to stop us from it and to stop even our lives. Like Luisa said, she taught on suicide. I taught on suicide so many times. So, but God's plan is for us to move forward. And our job as leaders in the Christian community is to open the eyes of the Christian community. In a lot of the church, and I am sorry to say that, I'm a pastor, but I minister people from other congregations and from other states that travel to Laredo. And it's not spoken in the church. This is not being spoken at the church. Some pastors do not want to deal with this issue, so it's not being even talked about. And it's really, really affecting the way that we're going to be building a future for the kingdom before Christ comes.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lucy. When the two of you were talking, I took some notes. Let's start with Luisa. When you said that, make sure you tell your child your voice matters. It made me to really stop, and right there, I had like a rewind, a replay in my mind of sometime what I tell my little boy. He's only 4. But many times when I'm talking with his dad, he will come and interrupt, and I will tell him, you don't do that. So while you are talking, it made me to rethink about a better strategy. All of a sudden, while you are talking, I was like, wow, maybe what I'm saying to the boy may not be good, because the day that he will come in emergency, I may not be able to catch on that, and I might just shut him down. So thank you so much for saying that. You're so right. In a culture where we think like, well, we have a parent like this movie, because I said so. No, We are no longer at that stage. Our children are being exposed, and we want to make sure, like Luisa said, that we equip them very early in their life to know that their voice matters. And you talk about also the fact that we need to teach the child or the children about when to talk and when it's an emergency. Thank you for bringing that out. I learned a lot from that today. One other thing that I believe it was Pastor Lucy that was talking about it. In the three of us, our cases, and in Pastor Lucy, your mom, Luisa's grandmother, it was male that did the sexual abuse. Today, with everything that we are seeing in the world, let's also not forget about women also having, raping children.
Yes.
Not only women raping boys, but women raping girls. It is happening. It is happening. So we don't want people to just focus on the male, only being the predator, the sexual predator. We are having women also doing it. Not only in the US, but everywhere in the world it's happening. The male that some of Americans will not understand what I'm talking about, but I know Louise and Pastor Lucy and those living abroad will know exactly what I'm talking about. Abroad, we can afford to have maids. My mom told me about a story yesterday when I told her that I was preparing this show. My sisters had a maid, but because my sister had to go work in another city, she kind of like loaned her maid to my mom for a month. And my mom told me that when the young lady, I think she was, 17 years old? Just burst into her bedroom without knocking at the door. The first time that, first day that she started working for my mom. And my mom had to tell her, get out of my room. Don't you ever walk into my room without knocking the door. I could be naked. So the girl got out, and then later on, she was, helping my mom to cook in the kitchen. She said, Mom, I'm really sorry that what I did to you, I burst into your bedroom without knocking the door. I didn't know it was something bad, and I'm not supposed to do that. My mom said, really? And this is what the girl said. This is a maid, 17 years old. She told my mom that, thank God that my mom told her that it made her to realize that not all women in the big city act like the way that her former boss acted. So my mom was like, what do you mean? Her former boss, this is somebody who's well known in my country. Well known. In fact, she's a CEO or I believe an executive director of one big women nonprofit.
No.
But this is the maid telling my mom that her previous boss used to ask her to bath her. Picture this. This is an adult woman asking a 17-year-old to bath her when she's bathing her to even touch her private parts. And she will tell the girl that, yeah, this is just making me to feel good. The girl didn't, because the girl is coming from a small city. So she didn't understand what was going on. She thought it was her job. And she said it went on and on and on. And these women will ask her to do this every night. And one day, her boss, her former boss, brought, we're going to talk about it, a sexual toy, and ask her, the maid, to basically play with a sexual toy on her private parts. Mm. So this girl was introduced to something else, and she thought it was normal.
Yes.
And I was horrified when my mom was telling me that, because I'm thinking, oh my God, my sister had 4 children, small kids. And this is a maid that's supposed to take care of them. Think about it. I just wanted us to pause for me to bring this. Let's not only focus our attention on male sexual predator.
Yes.
Women also. Luisa, I would like us to talk now. I believe we already started actually about this topic of sexual harassment as a routine part of school children's life. While preparing this show, I found out that a review by school inspectorate concluded that sexual harassment has become normalized for young children in school, online, and in other unsupervised spaces, including parks and house parties. Pastor Lucy talked about, never allowing, I think some of her friends never allowing pajamas sleepovers. What are your take on this issue, Luisa?
Well, on the sexual harassment part of it, yeah, I mean, absolutely, I agree. It's going to vary from school district to school district. I mean, I asked my daughter this recently, and thankfully, and she's very, I mean, she's very aware because we have very, very open conversations in our household of what sexual harassment is, and she's not seen it. So at least I know there are some school districts. This is only middle school. She enters high school. It might change in high school. We'll see. But it's not surprising because pornography is so prolific right now. And with the internet and with the phones, I mean, the average age that a child is introduced to pornography is 11 years old. And a lot of those cases, I don't remember statistically, but their first introduction, it's a really like high percentage. I don't remember what it is, but statistically, most kids are introduced by accident in the home. So, you have boys and girls too. There are girls who are addicted to pornography, and girls becoming addicted is one of the highest rates that we're seeing right now. But if you have a young man that becomes addicted to pornography, that becomes his view of what a woman is and begins to objectify her. He can no longer see his classmates or his friends in the same light. And so to me, I mean, it's horrible, but it's not surprising that they are finding this happening in schools because they're emulating, right? They're emulating what they see. And if young girls aren't taught to respect their bodies, to really understand how sacred their bodies are, they don't know how to defend themselves. And so you're going to see it happen more often. It reminded me back when I used to work. Mom, remember Portillo's? I was a teenager.
Yes.
And I remember that one of the workers there I don't remember if he grabbed her butt or something else. And she just kind of laughed.
Wow.
But I, being me, I said, why would you think that's okay? And I remember he said something that kind of took me aback a little bit, but he said, well, because she always lets me. And I asked him, why would you do that to her? And you wouldn't, because I know you wouldn't do it to me. And he had a crush on me. Like I knew he had a crush on me, and I knew he would never do that to me. I said, why would you do that to her? Like, why do you think that's okay? And he said, well, because she lets me. And so you have two aspects. You have kids that are, being groomed to objectify women, and then the other, women especially, and even boys who don't know that it's okay to say, no, this right here, this is sacred and you're not touching it.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Luisa, for saying that. With my son and Pastor Lucy talked about it. I never believe in those pajamas sleepover. Never believe in leaving my child at someone's house, even if they're a friend that I think I know will say, oh, if you and your husband, pastor, are going out, you can drop the child. I never did. Either I don't go out or I take him with me. Not only that, I remember because I knew what almost happened to me when I was 8 or 9 years old. My baby, when he was, I think, 6 months old, and it was time for me to start taking him to daycare. Even though he was only 6 months, I started teaching him about his private part. A baby, 6 months old. I knew he couldn't really talk, But when I'm bathing him, I will talk to him about his private parts. And I will tell him, if you go to daycare, I know you cannot talk, baby, but if anybody, this is how they're supposed to clean you. If anybody clean you differently than this, start crying, don't stop crying. Because the cry of a baby will bring somebody to pay attention.
Yes.
And of course, when he starts going to daycare, when I'm bathing him, I check his body to make sure there is no, wound or anything. We have to be vigilant.
Yes.
We have to be vigilant. So don't ever think that the child is too small to not talk or defend himself, because you might be talking to a baby. But why, when a baby is born, they can recognize our voice? When we call them, even though they are babies, they turn their eyes to look at us because the subconscious make them to understand what we are saying. So based on that, from the time that my child was 6 years old, 6 months old, I start teaching him that. And the more he's growing, the more I'm having that conversation with him. Like, at the same, he's been at the same daycare for over 3 years now. And I remember one time, all of a sudden, my son in the morning, he's like, I don't want to go to school. That's here. He's been going to the same daycare for over 2.5 years. All of a sudden, he doesn't want to go, and he will cry. And when I go pick him up, he will cling to me. So I asked, I called the school director, and I asked questions. In fact, God made it possible for the teacher that he had at that time to have like an attitude with me. And that prompted me to. And I straightly told the director, I don't want him in her class. Something is going on. A child who used to be babbling in the morning to go to school, all of a sudden, he doesn't want to go. He started to become quiet. He wasn't sexual abuse, but I'm pretty sure, he was not comfortable in that class. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to bring that out. Now, Pastor Lucy and Luisa, this question is for the two of you. What are some of the truth about sexual predators that you could share with us?
So, sometimes when we see these abduction videos, as parents, we tend to get really, we tend to have this idea of predators. These are the guys that will like snatch your kids from Walmart and that does happen. But it takes our attention away from the more likely danger. And so 93% of juvenile victims of sexual abuse is by people they know.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not very likely, that your kid's going to get snatched off the road. It can happen. And I'm not telling parents not to be careful with that, but don't let that consume you when you're not paying attention to where the real danger is. And so you have to look closer to home. So 59% are acquaintances and 37% are family members. Okay, so those are the numbers. Predators don't just groom the kids, they groom the parents. So they win your respect, your love, your admiration. They want you as a parent to trust them. So it's very important to understand that and to see that, because oftentimes we think, oh, I would know, it's not that creepy guy in the corner of the library that's most likely to be the predator. It's the really bubbly, happy, person that's coming to my house every day that seems so nice. So the other thing about predators is that they test boundaries with kids. So, generally, they don't necessarily, there was my mom's case with someone just randomly, at the movie theater. But they tend to test boundaries with kids to see how far they could go. So they'll first start with like a caress, like touching their cheeks or touching their hair. And it'll gradually get more and more. They want to see how far they can go. They're testing to see how far the child will let them go. And they tend to prey on the most neglected, the quiet ones, the shy ones, the ones that won't speak up, and the ones that don't know, because they're assessing risk. They want to minimize the risk that they will be found out. So they go for the ones that are not going to speak up. So that's just general view of like the profile of who a predator is generally.
Thank you so much, Luisa, for bringing that out. Pastor Luisa?
Okay, Luisa said mostly a lot of the stuff I was going to say, but one thing I have to say in our experience as counselors and healing ministers, one of the things that we see is that a lot of the predators have been themselves victims before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a spirit that is laid, is like an egg that is planted when the abuse happens. So this is also why we see, and with all the respect of who's watching, also kids become homosexuals when a boy is being abused by a man at the later age. These kids tend to have homosexual tendencies, is because it was planted on them. It was not in them, as well, with girls. I'm not excluding girls, but we have to watch for so many things as parents. And abusers disguise themselves, within the framework of the church, like Luisa says, the trust, we tend to trust ministers so well, and say, okay, my kid is safe there. My kid is okay. Well, it's okay if he's in a mass setting of kids all together and it's only one person, but when your kid goes one-on-one with somebody, that's when the problem is. And like Luisa said, those people, especially within the ministry boundaries where there are many predators, because the enemy truly, let's speak very clearly, Mercy, they will be outside the church. But what the predators when Satan wants to destroy the most is within the church, inside the church. And within the pastors and ministers, there is a high percentage of pornography issues. We deal that a lot within the church, ministers and pastors. They need to take care. If pastors are listening, are having issues with that, you have to really break that curse, get out of it. And maybe you cannot get out by yourself. Well, this is why the word says that between two or more, the things of the Lord are done. We need somebody that we could trust that could help us heal from that. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is within the church is a high risk of, unfortunately, I'm saying it, I'm a pastor. We have a congregation, we have children, we have young people in our church, we have women. But the enemy is loose, and we have to keep our eyes on our kids and our young ladies and our young boys, because all of them are prey for the enemy at this point. So that's all what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lucy, not Pastor Luisa, but that's just, I believe, what God is bringing Pastor Luisa to become.
Maybe by faith. You said it, not me, Luisa.
We are almost toward the end of our talk show today, but before I let you go, Luisa, our inclination is to be hesitant to talk about sex with our kids, and frankly, be weird about it. Children can smell fear. If they feel that from you, they won't talk to you about it. If they hear something from their friends, they will go to their friends, who we know, of course, will give them horrible advice and information. So parents, relax, be nonchalant about it, and trust me, the questions will pour in. These are your words in your ebook called Preparing Our Daughters for Puberty, Mother-Daughter Bible Study. What is the ebook about, Luisa, and what motivates you to write about such a book?
Mm-hmm. So when we were talking about predators, one of the things that I forgot to mention is that predators don't like children that are fully aware of their bodies. Okay. And it's a reason why many professionals recommend that you teach kids the biological name of their body parts, because it sends a signal to a predator, oh, this kid knows, right? So when I was 2, I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't process it. But if a child knows, they'll do something that'll cause the predator back away or say, you know, this is maybe not a good idea. And so I don't, in this book, I have other articles, and I think I've provided the links for you, and you're welcome to provide those for your readers, that talk specifically about, you know, predators and practical tips for parents. So this book is in, I don't talk about predators too much, and it's meant to be for, you know, tweens, so between ages like 8 and 11. Mm-hmm. But the idea behind them is for moms to have those important conversations with their daughters about puberty. And then in the same book, I have a chapter on sex, how to biblically introduce the concept of sex to your child. And why is that even important? Especially I find among Christians that there's this, like, they're afraid that if they tell their kids about sex, that's gonna sexualize them. And, you know, I just want to be frank, your kids are already being sexualized. Like, even if you homeschool, like when you go visit a family member through their cousins, I mean, unless your kid is in a bubble, they are going to be exposed to images, to words, to things that people tell them. So the best thing that you can do is be the first one to introduce the topic, and do it from a godly, biblical perspective. And so in this book, it's really meant for girls, obviously, to learn about puberty, and we go into the the nitty gritty, menstruation, growing breasts, that kind of thing. But also the first part of the book is on identity. And so I talk a lot about the image of God and how God views them, because part of my goal in the book is for young girls to have a proper identity and to understand where their true value and self-worth comes. And, you know, and then we get into the nitty gritty of it. And at the end of each chapter, I even have a craft that if parents want to do with their girls. And I wrote it for girls. I wish I had one for boys, but I don't have boys. I only have girls, so I know how to talk to them about these kind of things. But that's what the book is about. And I don't know, Mercy, if you want me to go into a little bit of, I guess, some of the practical tips.
Yes, please.
Of what parents can do to protect kids. So I think
maybe sharing with us 1 or 2 tips. And for those who want to explore more, we will put the link to the ebook. If you don't win, if you decide to not share and tag, and you can still purchase the book. You have a link at the top of the video. So maybe just 1 or 2 tips so that parents can really want to see what is, more into the book.
Yeah. So, so I have a whole article that I talk about, like, 4 biblical truths to protect kids against sexual predators. I think it's always important is just to for the kids to know what God has to say about the issue. So as a first step, even as they're like little things like, telling your little girl or your little boy, even when they're like a baby or one, you're created in the image of God. You're created in the image of God, to have that define who they are, where their worth is. So for me, it's always you want to undergird any conversation with God's truth. And then as far as you know, like practical things. There's a lot of them, but control and monitor electronic devices.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of really good software out there. I have one for my girls. I use Net Nanny, but there's also Bark. There are a lot of different ones that you can use that puts parental controls where they're allowed to search the internet, but the algorithms are able to block certain pages and keep them, you know, and keep them safe. Because I never wanted to get my middle schooler a phone, but then it became just so necessary because of middle school and because of the schooling requirements and everything. So the best way to do that is just, you know, get one of these devices. And it's not horribly expensive when you realize just how much it could be helping your kids. And then one other thing that I would recommend is I maintain a culture of open doors. Like it's one thing that I always tell my girl, like in our house, we keep the doors open unless you're protecting the sacredness of your body. So changing, showering, whatever, the doors are obviously closed, but I just try to raise them to have a life where there are no secrets. Like if you're following God's word, if you're doing what's appropriate, there shouldn't be any secrets. Like we're just open. Obviously my daughter, she's older. If her sister's being too loud, she'll close the door, and that's okay when things are being loud. But generally we're just, and I ingrain that in them. So they know that if they're at somebody else's house, that adults should never be with them behind a closed door. Like I don't like basements. I hate basements. We have a basement, and that's my husband's space. Their space is an open area in the house. They have their TV, that's where their friends hang out, because I like the idea and the culture of openness, because generally things done in secret, there's a reason that they're being done in secret. So that's just a couple things that I would put out there.
Thank you so much, Luisa. Pastor Lucy, what final advice would you give to parents, and especially to mothers, about keeping their children safe from sexual abuse?
Knowledge empowers us, and the word of God empowers us to be smart spiritually and be able to understand how the enemy moves in our lives and our children's lives. So my daughter taught you now in a verse that I will quote for you. I'm not gonna read it, but I'm gonna have your viewers read it at home. And it talks about sexual sin. This is how Paul is using this, 1 Corinthians 6, verses 12 to 20. You know, when we are abused, sexual sin is committed against us, but unfortunately it marked us. When we commit sexual sin, we also are, you know, defiling our bodies. And this is the only sin that is actually done with the body. So this is why we have to take care of our kids. This is why we have to be vigilant, like you said, watchful. You know, like the birds are watchful with the little young kids, and protective. Is not too much protectiveness. Yes, we have to give freedom to the kids, but we have to make sure, especially in the type of environment, that they are protected. There is so much on the TV, even in the cartoons. Please, parents, be aware, not all the cartoons are for children. Watch, don't be naive. Christians cannot be naive. They have to be really smart in Christ to know what is right and what is wrong. Do your researches, and please pray for your children at all times. Recite Psalm 91 every single day over your children and your family. We might not think, but you know, we look for other things at times, but God has empowered us with his word to do things that will loose the heavenlies to send angels to protect those that we are calling to be protected with. So that's my advice as a pastor. keep your children. And if you have gotten into, you know, you have been sexually abused, or maybe the one watching has abused somebody, there is an exit for both of you. There is future in Christ for both of you, because what God forgives, he doesn't see anymore. He sends it to the depths of the sea and he will see no more. But what he expects from us is to heal, to forgive, and move forward to fully engulf in all the plan that he has for our lives. So.
And I wanted to add something to my mom said there. She says that knowledge empowers. And I think the knee-jerk reaction, you know, if parents are going through this, is the knee-jerk reaction is going to be, you're going to go home and you're just going to be like this over your children. No. And overprotection can actually be a bad thing, because we don't teach our kids how to navigate an evil and cruel world. And so, yes, there are certain limits of protection. And as they grow older, we kind of have to unroll that and unpack that a little bit, because they have to learn to navigate the world. And we want them to navigate it while they're still at home, while we can still have those conversations. So that's why it's important to talk to kids about what is sex, what's appropriate touching, what's not appropriate touching. Give them scenarios. Like I tell my daughter, you know, my daughters just went off to camp, you know, one for 3 weeks and it's a Christian camp. But I don't go in there thinking because it's a Christian camp, they'll be safe. No, we had a conversation on the way to camp. We reviewed safety measures. We reviewed, okay, if a counselor asks you to do this, or what do? You have no access to your cell phone. Like, who can you go for help? So we go over that information so they know what to do. If mommy can't protect them, what they can do to protect themselves. So that's why that open communication and being open to talk about these things, and don't get weirded out about it, because you get weirded out, they're not going to come and talk to you about it. You got to talk about it like you talk about anything else.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Pastor Lucy and Luisa. You know, as a final word to all of what we said, and I believe Pastor Lucy talk about it, is prayer. Child, since he was a baby, when I bath him every time, and I'm, you know, for me to dress him up, that's the time that I used to pray. Yes. And I will literally put my hands on his private part and pray. I can't remember which book of Psalm is it, but where it talks about God actually giving instruction that we can pray over our children's sexual parts, that they will not be exposed to sex before the right time.
Exactly.
Which is marriage. So my first time when I did it, my husband looked at me like, what are you doing? He's a baby. I said, no. So I prophesy and I pray over his sexual part that no man, no women will be raping him, that his sexual part will remain pure until God's timing for him to know what is secret about sex. It can look crazy, but I go by what God is telling me to do. Yes. So thank you so much, Pastor Lucy. Thank you so much, Luisa, for making time to just come and talk about such a deep issue. I really pray that those that are watching us will not only watch, but they will share. You don't know whose life or whose children's life you could save by sharing this video. This is not about views. This is about sharing information, empowering parents, and also, even if you have children, make sure they can watch this also to know that, yes, they can also be better prepared, better informed, and protect themselves. Again, Luisa and Pastor Lucy, thank you so much. And hopefully this will not be the last time that we will come together to bless so many with what God has empowered us to do. You have a great afternoon, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Mercy.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
God bless you.